Carnivorous plants have become a staple of sci-fi horror, from triffids to man-eating flytraps. But they're not just limited to fiction. Evolution has produced carnivorous plants at least 12 different times. But why does this strategy keep coming up again and again? What advantage does it have over the way that plants normally get their food? And if it does give an advantage, why aren't there carnivorous plants everywhere? Let's find out. To be clear, nothing like a triffid really exists, and the carnivorous plants that do exist in the world are nowhere near big enough to be a threat to humans. But to insects, and sometimes even small mammals and lizards, these bizarre living death traps are a very real threat. They take on a variety of forms, from the infamous Venus flytrap to the widespread pitcher plants, and to more obscure forms like the tendril-snaring sundews and the sticky-stemmed false asphodel, using a mix of nectar and bright colours and scents to attract their prey. There are around 860 species of carnivorous plants spread around the world, on every continent except for Antarctica, representing at least 12 families across 6 orders of the plant kingdom. That might sound like a lot, but compared to the overall diversity of plants, it's just a tiny fraction. Do you want to take a second and guess what percentage of plants are carnivorous? I'll give you a second. It's 0.2%. Just 860 species out of over 400,000 in total. Well done if you got that one right. So we know that these carnivorous plants keep springing up all over the world across multiple independently evolving lineages of plants. But they're also very rare. How can it be that both of those are true at once? To start answering all of these questions, let's first remember how plants normally get their food. Photosynthesis captures carbon from the atmosphere into sugar, allowing the creation of carbohydrate energy sources within the plant. Meanwhile, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other mineral nutrients are absorbed from the soil via the roots, usually in association with fungi that also live in the soil. These are called mycorrhizal fungi. This is one of the strangest things about carnivorous plants. They still do photosynthesis and absorb nutrients from the soil, but they've also evolved digestion as a supplement to those other processes. I can't stress enough how weird that is. No other plants do this. None of them are capable of directly absorbing and processing animal protein, at least not without help from some sort of microbial middleman. In fact, this is so unique that it forms one of the 3 diagnostic criteria for truly carnivorous plants: modified trap leaves, digestion, and absorption of digested nutrients. All carnivorous plants share those 3 features. We might assume that complex traits like these would be shared across the descendants of a single common ancestor in which those complex traits first evolved. That would be the simplest explanation, and we might think that the simplest explanation is the most likely one. But in this case, we know that's not true. We know that these traits spring up all over the plant tree of life, a clear case of convergent evolution. So what do all of these species have in common, if not a single common ancestor? I'll spoil it for you, it's their habitats. The environment and conditions that these plants occur in is a key clue in determining why they have convergently evolved carnivory so many times. These plants tend to occur in what scientists would call nutrient-poor environments. These places have relatively infertile soil, commonly places like swamps and bogs and other sorts of wetlands. If the soils in those places don't contain enough available nutrients, then evolving to consume animals provides a good alternative way for those plants to obtain mineral nutrients, like nitrogen and phosphorus that other plants would normally get from the soil. There are now scientific studies to back that up. One study in particular on the false asphodel, Triantha occidentalis, from the Pacific Northwest of North America, showed that as much as 64% of the nitrogen contained in its leaves came from animal sources. So it is still getting nitrogen from other places, the other 36%, but it's relying heavily on animal sources of protein to pick up the slack. Wherever those sorts of habitat conditions appear, this carnivorous solution to the nutrition problem starts to crop up. And it seems like quite a clever solution, right? You can reduce your dependence on the resources where you're literally rooted down by instead letting resources come to you. But actually, not really. If the competitive edge that carnivory gave to those plants was enough to give them the edge over plants anywhere, then we'd expect them to be much more common. So why doesn't this evolve just anywhere? What is the limiting factor? The leaves of the trap structure, like the pads of the Venus flytrap and the sticky tendrils of the sundew, are energetically expensive and resource intensive, both to grow and to maintain. But more than that, the genetic changes that need to happen to even unlock the possibility of digesting and absorbing animal protein are extensive and very complicated. We take them for granted every single day of our lives, but the biochemistry and physiology behind it is mind-blowing, and even we rely on microbes in our gut to do lots of the processing for us. And yet, the plants are doing it. But as we said, it's not an easy thing to achieve. The genomics underpinning all of it don't seem particularly well studied, but it seems that many carnivorous plants achieve the necessary steps by essentially co-opting and modifying genes that they would normally use for stress tolerance, the things that they would normally use to protect themselves against outside threats, things like drought and infections. That would include genes and enzymes for chemical defense against microbes, used for breaking down those kinds of biological structures. Enzymes including glucanases and chitinases, which break down those kinds of organic molecules in the cell walls of fungi and bacteria, have been found in genomic analyses of carnivorous plants, like pitcher plants, for example. Other enzymes, like phosphatases, which are used to break phosphate groups off of larger molecules, like proteins or their amino acid constituents, can be found secreted from the sticky hair traps of carnivorous false asphodels. Phosphorus is a common limiting nutrient in scarce environments, and so the presence of those enzymes is clear evidence of organic digestion to make up for that deficiency in phosphorus from the surroundings. There seems to be some sort of trade-off at work here. In those exact nutrient-poor environments where we find them, it makes sense for those plants to evolve carnivory as a means of making up for the scarcity of resources around them. But in other circumstances, it doesn't really make sense to invest the energy and resources into doing that, as plants in other places seem to be able to do just fine collecting energy and resources from the sun and the atmosphere and the soil, without the need of putting effort and energy into capturing and absorbing animal protein. As ever, evolution produces what works in that place at that time. But in this case, it leaves carnivorous plants limited to small geographic ranges with very specific conditions. Venus flytraps are notoriously difficult to grow at home. I think mine didn't make it out of the seedling stages when I tried to grow some years and years ago. But out in the real world, this can have some quite extreme implications. Many species of carnivorous plant are only known from single locations. They're probably more widely spread than just that one exact spot, but the fact that they haven't been found outside of it does emphasize their rarity and how sensitive they can be to external conditions. This has led to a sort of turning of the tables, with the would-be hunter becoming the hunted. A large proportion, something like 30 or 40% of carnivorous plant species around the world, are under threat of extinction. Their sensitive ecology means that they are often the first species to suffer when their habitats start to become degraded, particularly suffering from things like agricultural expansion and pollution. Since the wetland habitats they tend to inhabit are some of the most damaged and encroached upon environments on Earth, they tend to be the first to bear the brunt of human-imposed threat. Despite some more recent recognition of these rare and bizarre plants, and some concerted efforts to implement protections for them, things still aren't looking that good for them. We asked at the beginning why this strange trait evolved so many times independently. It looks like the common selective pressure of lacking nutrition in their environments drove the evolution of plant carnivory, allowing them to supplement their nutritional intake with animal sources of protein and thus gain an advantage over other plants living in those same resource-poor environments. However, the relative complexity and novelty of the genetics underpinning it, and the resource costs of maintaining the trap mechanisms and digestive biochemistry, just mean that this isn't going to be worth it anywhere else. This isn't something that evolution can just stumble upon easily. There's a multi-layered sequence of anatomical and physiological and biochemical changes that all need to coincide with each other to create a plant that's not only capable of catching animal prey, but also digesting it and absorbing those nutrients. And that is a strange mix. If you like plant biology, you might like my recent video on a fossil flower stuck in amber. Or if convergent evolution is more what you're after, you might like my much earlier videos on caffeine and porcupines. I'll leave links at the end of the video and down in the description. Please also, if you liked this video or learned anything from it, leave a comment down below. I know it's a very generic YouTube outro plea, but it does help me work out what you want me to talk about and how much depth you want me to go into. So please do let me know, and thank you once again for your time.